Welcome to the next tutorial in our Photoshop series. We're going to go over a way to create a quick lomography effect. And a lomography effect is a type of effect that you might see on Instagram photos or other types of photos that make it look kind of a hipster-like or retro look. Now, it's very easy to create this look. It's actually extremely fast to create this look in Photoshop. All you have to do is open up a photo. You can see, for example, I have a photo right here. You want to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Curves. And we're going to make a new Curves layer here. Now I'm going to make the Curves layer called the lomography effect, which we'll go ahead and type that in. And you can see we've got a nice little layer that goes over our background. It also has its own layer, so that way we won't have to worry about making the effect on the image and not having it affect the image permanently. So the way we start this effect is we go through and check out the curves. So we've got the histogram here, and we want to start out by actually putting a point here and dragging it down a little bit, which you see will actually drag down some of the shadows in the image. And then you want to put a little point up here and drag that one up, which will actually drag in some more light into the image. Then we'll go into the red, and we'll actually put a little point there, drag that down a little bit so we can get some more in there. But we actually want to drag the shadows up a little bit so we can get some more darkness depth to the image. We also want to drag up the end here as well and go to the green and do the same thing. Drag up a little bit there, drag down a little bit at the top. And then when we get to the blue, we'll actually do this a little bit different. We actually want to drag up on the previous one, and we actually want to drag down at the top here, which will actually add a lot of different blues to the image there. So if we go back to the original RGB, we can actually pull up the shadows a bit, because we want to create that kind of soft tone in the shadows as well. And by doing that, that allows us to create a great lomography effect. It's actually kind of overdone here. It's a little bit too much on the image. So if we go to the opacity, and when you turn the opacity down to maybe about like 50, 55, you can see that it has put itself over the image, and you can see a nice effect on your image that gives it kind of a hipster or retro look. And you can turn on and off the layer to see the difference in the image as we put the Lomo effect on. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Welcome to our advanced GIMP tutorial, where we'll actually show you a way how to do digital black and white conversion. It's quite an easy effect to do. And we'll start by opening up an image that you might have seen before on a previous tutorial. We'll open that up and we'll show you how we'll be able to do the conversion here. Now, you can do a saturate effect in GIMP as well, but what I like to do is create a new layer. So we'll go over here and we'll go ahead and make a new layer. We'll make that transparent, that's fine. And from there, we'll also create a layer mask. So go ahead and add a layer mask to this layer. Make sure that it's set to white so it's full opacity. And you want to change this layer's mode to saturation. And by changing this layer's mode to saturation, you'll be able to change the opacity on the saturation on the layer. To get the saturation on the layer, you'll go over to the bucket tool and you will put in black on the actual layer itself. And this will create desaturation of the layer. And you'll be able to see the entire layer is in black and white. Now, you can set the opacity on this so the effect is not that dramatic. So you can have some color, you can have less color, all the way up to 100%. So you can change this as you will, instead of just using the saturation effect, which will be one time only. You can use this to great effect to choose the granular control over the black and white conversion effect. Now, what you can also do is with this and having the mask, you can go to the original layer itself, use the scissors tool, and you can pick out parts of the image you want to have in color itself. So if you see here, I have picked out some of the glasses to be in color, and the scissors tool is one of the best tools for this, as it tries to find the edges of the glasses on our background layer here. And of course, you could drag each point to make sure it tries to find all of the different parts of the glasses, and then we'll go ahead and click inside to select it. And if we do that and then go back to our layer mask for our saturation layer, we can go in there and we can select the brush tool, Make sure it's set to black because we're going to be painting on the layer mask so we can make the color shine through. And you can just start painting in those glasses there and make those glasses show up in actual color compared to the rest of the image. And that's just a very quick way of how to do digital black and white conversion in GIMP. Welcome to the next in our tutorial series about GIMP. In this next tutorial, we'll go over a quick way how to do a coloring of a sketch that you might scan in or you have received on the internet. And it's really easy to start coloring in GIMP. To start, we'll go ahead and have our sketch open, as you can see right here, and we will go ahead and add a new layer above that sketch. So we'll go ahead and make that a transparent layer, and we will also make sure that that layer is set to multiply instead of normal, because if it is set to normal, you'll just draw the color over the sketch beneath that layer. But with multiply, it actually adds the color over the layer, but in a way so that the previous layer on the bottom shows through. So if you see right here, we've set our color to something that's a little bit more skin toned. Make sure to do that as well. Hit OK. And then we will start coloring in over top our sketch. And you can see just by coloring in here with the color that we picked, a nice skin tone color, we can start to get the sketch to look more like something that is 3D or an actual colored in sketch. Now this is a part of the longer process here, is to color in all the parts you need. So I'm going to do just a really quick once over so that way it doesn't take too long and you can see the effects, but also we're not too worried about it being too messy. So as you can see there, I've colored in her face on this sketch. What we can also do is switch a little bit to the burn tool. We'll switch to the dodge and burn tool, then we'll switch to burn down here at the bottom on the options, so that way we can put in some shadows in the image where we think where the shadows are. And we can make sure to change your size of your brush. You can use that using the bracket keys on your keyboard. Left bracket, right bracket changes the size of your brush. And we'll brush in some shadows here on the image, right where the shadows seem to be. If you have a sketch that has the shadows on it, it makes it easier for you to burn in some shadows. And every time you click and burn in the shadows, it will stack on top of each other, so it will make the shadows darker and darker as you continue burning. Now you can see that there are lines here that we can easily tell between the color and the shadows. So from there, we can do a little bit of smudging, and smudging allows us to mix the colors together so that way they are not just lines on the picture. So we'll actually turn down the rate here of the smudging so that way it's not too obvious, and we'll start doing a little bit of smudging on the image here. And make the lines turn into actual colors instead of very apparent as lines. And that is a very quick and easy way to get started with coloring in GIMP. Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP. In this advanced tutorial, we'll show you how to do some tone mapping on the images that you might need to get some extra color or some extra different shadows and cool things that you would like to get on your photos. Starting out, what we'll do is take a picture right here. I've got a picture of a good night scene. We'll go ahead and start. We'll create a duplicate layer of the night scene. And what we need to do is create a special enhancement filter called Advanced Tone Mapping. Now, this doesn't normally come with GIMP, so I recommend that you go find a plugin for Advanced Tone Mapping. It's very easy to find on the internet. GIMP itself has a repository of plugins that you're able to find Advanced Tone Mapping. And once you get that and install it into your GIMP plugin folder, you're going to go into GIMP and use Enhance Advanced Tone Mapping under the filters. Then that will show you a pop-up dialog window that you'll want to switch the copies of the merge layer. You want to make it about 5. Press OK. It'll create a bunch of different colors and make the whole thing look really good. From there, you want to right-click on the layer and click Merge Down. And just merge down until you get one picture, one layer. Next, you'll want to go up to the colors and do levels. And on the levels, you want to switch that to maybe about 94, 93, or 92 on the gamma. Press OK there so we can get that into our picture. The next thing you want to do is create another duplicate layer. And then on that layer, you want to click Colors, Desaturate. And from there, you want to actually have it at lightness. You can do luminosity, you can do average. You can see that it changes the different shades of gray. But let's choose lightness, click OK. And then you want to go back over to colors, click invert, and you'll see all the different colors inverted here. Then you want to go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur. And you want to set that blur to about, I think I want to do 20. 20 here seems fine. So now to blur the whole image, what we're going to do with this blurred image is we're going to switch the mode on the top layer here to overlay. And now you'll see it has overlaid onto our image down below. And you want to tweak this by using the opacity bar over here on the right. So we're going to set that to about 48, and then we will merge the layers down, and now you can see we have our new image that shows the different tone maps of color that are in our night sky image. And that's how you get some tone maps in your GIMP program. Welcome to the next in our advanced tutorial series in GIMP. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to remove noise from photos where the pictures have been taken that have a lot of noise in them. And here you'll see we have started with a picture that has a bunch of noise in it, and we're going to remove the noise, and we can do this in many different ways, including going to the filter option, blur. We can do a regular blur, or we can do a Gaussian blur. And a lot of people like to use these blurs to get rid of the noise in the image. However, there is a better tool to get rid of the noise in images. It is an extra GIMP plugin that you can go find. Once you download that and put it into your GIMP program, you'll see it under your Enhance Filter options, and it's called Wavelet Denoise. And Wavelet Denoise will allow you to bring up this dialog box that produces a better algorithm to remove the noise from your images. And when you go into it, you can see a preview of the image and the noise that will get reduced. So you can move around and find where most of the noise is coming from. And then you can go down to the thresholds and you can turn up the amount of noise being removed from the image. And you can decide whether or not you want to have more or less detail left in the image. And you can also change how much detail can be conserved when you start applying the denoise filter to the image. And then you hit OK, and you can see that it has reduced a lot of the noise in the image, and you can tweak this as you like. And there are many other different ways you can do this, but this is probably one of the best ways to remove noise from an image to make it look a little bit better to your clients or to any projects you might have in the future. And that is a quick way of how to remove extra kinds of film grain or noise in your images in GIMP. Welcome to the next tutorial in our Advanced GIMP tutorial series. This tutorial will show you about how to use luminosity masks to help you with your photos, so that way you can reduce some of the saturation in the colors of your photos, or just in general have better control over what you see inside of your photos. To start off, we have an image open here, which we're going to use luminosity masks to remove some of the saturation in the photo so we can see more of the mountain behind. So if you go over to the left, you can see we are normally on our layers section here, and we want to create a copy of our original layer, so duplicate layer. And then we want to go over to channels. And you can see what we're going to do here is select our red channel from the rest of our channels here. We want to select all on our image. I'm going to drag the red channel down to the copy down here. And then we will start by creating this one as the L for light, because we're going to save the highlights of the image and we're going to save the shadows of the image. We'll start this by right-clicking on the light part of the image, and we will subtract from selection. Make sure your entire image is still selected. That will select the darker parts of the image. And we will go to select, save to channel. That'll actually save the shadows of the image. So we'll save that as D for dark. And then if you right-click on our layer again, our light channel here, click subtract from selection one more time, it gets even further darker, and we'll save that as DD. And then we'll go back to our lights again, subtract from selection one more time, and we'll save that as DDD. So that way you can see all the different shadows have been saved now out of our image, and we'll now go and save the lighter parts of our image instead of our darker parts. So select none, then go to our darker parts of our image, select all, and when you do this, you will get the lighter parts of the image instead of the darker parts, and you will do the same thing as you did before, which is you will click Save to Channel, and then I'll save this as LL, go back to the dark parts, subtract from selection, and we'll do it again, select, Save to Channel, and then we'll save that as LLL. In doing this, you will have created a whole bunch of different channels for your different shadows and highlights in your image, and we'll be using that as a part of our layer mask to create luminosity mask. Now if you go back over to the layers, you can click on your copy, which I'll set here as light mask, and then I'll make another copy of this, which we'll call the dark mask. And then for the light mask, we'll right click and then make sure that your selection is none. So we'll right click on the light mask, click add layer mask. Instead of normally you would make it white, we'll set it to channel. And you can see under our channel, we actually have all of our different channels here for our shadows and our highlights. So if we go to our light channel, we can add that, and it will actually change it so you can see our light channel removes all of our shadows from the image. And now we're able to edit the image of our luminosity layer by going to colors and colorize, making sure that our light mask layer is chosen, not the mask itself. And with the sliders here, you can see I can change the hue of the image to make it a lot better, and the lightness of the image, so that way it can come through without too much saturation going on in the image. And you can compare that to the original image, which you'll see here. Saturation, removed saturation. And there's a lot more things you can do with luminosity masks in GIMP. Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP. In this next tutorial, we'll show you how to create a contrast mask for your image. To create a contrast mask for your image, you've opened a previous image you may have seen on our previous tutorials here. To start with, we will create a duplicate layer of the image. Then on there, we will right-click, click Add Layer Mask, and you want to initialize the layer mask to a grayscale copy of the layer. Then, show the layer mask so we can see what we're looking at. Go over to Colors, Invert, And then you want to also give a filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then set that to about 4 or 5 on the blur radius. Next, go back to your layer mask. Click Show Layer Mask to turn it off. And there you can see we have our contrast mask on our layer. Now make sure to set your layer to overlay instead of normal, so that way you can see our contrast on top of our bottom layer in GIMP. And you can change the opacity, so you can change the contrast through this contrast mask in GIMP. And that's all you need to know about making a contrast mask in GIMP. On to the next tutorial in GIMP. This is a very quick tutorial, part 1, about changing background color in GIMP. It's actually a very quick way to do this in GIMP, especially if you have an image that already has a background color you'd like to remove. So the fastest way to change the color in your background is go up to Colors, Color to Alpha, and then you will see that there will be a color picker that you can pick down here, a little drop down box from blank color to alpha, and then you can click on this little eyedropper here, click on the image, then go back to your color picker, press OK, and you'll see on the preview that it has removed the color from your background. Click OK there. The color will have been removed from your background. You may now add a new layer to your image. Make sure to have it as a transparent layer. Drag that layer beneath your current layer, which you removed your color by putting it into alpha. And then you can use the bucket fill tool to switch to any other color you'd like to add to your image. And that is the very basics about changing a background color in GIMP. Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to change the background color in GIMP. This will be part 2 of our tutorials showing you how to change the background color. Another way you can change the background color in GIMP that is quite easy is go to your image, right-click, add an alpha channel if it doesn't have one already, and then from there you want to use the fuzzy select tool to select the part of the image you would like to delete to give ourselves a transparency. So you can see here it has selected all of the color besides the text itself, and if we were to continue from here, it would actually get rid of the background except for the other colors that we need to get rid of inside of the letters. To add the circles inside the text, you want to hold down the Shift button, which will add a plus symbol next to your fuzzy selector, and you can now add those bits inside the text into your selection. And doing so will allow you to delete all the parts of the image you want to get your alpha channel. So once you're finished there, just hit delete on your keyboard, and you'll see the background is now fully removed. And just like before, you can add a new layer with a transparency, put that below your current layer, and add a new color to your image by using the bucket fill tool. And that's another way about changing background color in GIMP. Our next tutorial in GIMP, we're going to show you what some of the blur filters can do to our images and add extra cool effects that might not be available elsewhere. We'll start by using our blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize blur filters, and that way you can see all the neat types of things you can do with your image. As you can see, we started with a bunch of duplicate layers of our original image and renamed them to blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize. From there, we can select our blur layer, turn that visibility on, and then go up to the filters, blur, and then blur. And it'll add a subtle blur effect to the image. You can see it on here. It's now much different from the original image. The details have been lost. And then we'll go up to our Gaussian blur, turn that visibility on, go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll turn the blur radius to about 11 seems fine. That's our Gaussian blur. Then we'll go to motion blur, turn that one on. Go to filters, blur, motion blur. We're going to make it a zoom, maybe about the center of the image here. The length of the zoom we'll put about 28, and it'll take a little bit longer to do this effect if your image is large. So now you can see that there is a kind of rush to get to the mountain look to the image. It's really cool. Then we'll go to our pixelize layer. Go to there, go to filter, blur, pixelize, and it'll create a kind of chunky pixel look to the image, so it'll actually kind of blur it out in something that's kind of like if you censor an image or protect someone's face or anything like that, you might see somebody has done something like this. So we'll set the pixel width to 7 and the pixel height to 7, and that is the pixelized blur on our image. So if we want to go back to regular blur, let's remove all the different visibilities of the other image. And we can change the opacity on this blur, so we can change how much of the blur obscures the image, which is okay. If we go to Gaussian blur, we can do this with our opacity in such a way where we create kind of a hazy look to the image. You can see it looks like it's in some sort of a dream. Then to motion blur, if you wanted to change the opacity on there, it creates more of a kind of like ray-like effect coming out from the image itself. So you can dial that in as much as you want or as you like. Then if we go to pixelize, we can do the same thing where we can turn the opacity up or down on that, but it just changes whether or not the blocks show up. What we can do here is we can select part of the image and we can create kind of a border in the image. And to do that, we've selected a spot in the image. And then you'll want to go to the pixelize layer, add a layer mask, make it the selection that we've just put onto our layer, but invert the mask because we want a border on the inside and not just the inside of the selection as our pixelized blur. And then click add, and you can see now on the edges of the image, if you right click, select none, you can see on the edges of the image there's a nice pixelized border. And that's an intro to some of the different blur filters in GIMP. Welcome back to our tutorials in GIMP. For our next tutorial, we'll show you about the selective Gaussian blur and how it can be used to remove noise from your images. Just like our previous tutorials where we've shown you how to reduce noise, we can select part of the image that we want to remove the noise from. As you can see here, I have a selection. Then go up to Filters, Blur, Selective Gaussian Blur. And in that, you want to select where the delta is. That's basically telling the Gaussian blur how much of the image you'd like to remove the noise from, and set the blur radius so that way it can come out looking good. As we hit OK here, you can see that it has removed a lot of the noise from the image by getting rid of the noise through the blur. And that's just a quick way to show you how to do selective Gaussian blur in GIMP. Welcome to our next tutorial in GIMP. We'll go over more tools that have been used in GIMP to create different effects in your image. The tools we'll go over for this part of our tutorial will include the clone tool, the healing tool, the perspective clone tool, the blur and sharpen tool, the smudge tool, and the dodge and burn tool. Starting out with the clone tool, if you go to our image that you see here, it will not let you do anything with the brush until you hold down Control, click a source on the image, and then it'll use that source when you decide to paint on your image, thus duplicating the image as you paint over it. The next tool, the healing tool, allows you to heal parts of the image much like in Photoshop when you want to fix parts of your image that have blemishes on them or other various problems. Much like the clone tool, you have to set a part of the image that you would like to use as the basis for healing the rest of the image. And as we start moving through our image, it'll try to heal the image based on what's around it as opposed to the previous clone part where it just copied whatever it was using the source as. For the perspective clone tool, we can modify the perspective of our image, not in a permanent way, but in a way that GIMP will use when we decide to clone the rest of the image later. By going to the perspective clone option in the tool options, we can now set a source that we'd like to clone from, say this corner up here where the perspective will be changed, and we can paint that into our image. And as you can see, the perspective of the image in the upper left is now in our bottom right at a very different perspective. The next tool, Blur and Sharpen tool, we can set to blur. And then on our image, we can start blurring out parts of the image as we need to. And then if you set that to sharpen, you can sharpen parts of the image as you need to. You can turn up the rate on this to increase the sharpen amount, so that way you do not have to sharpen more than once on an image. If you go to the smudge tool, this will use the colors around it and smudge them together so they become more of a blur with all the colors that are included when you start smudging. The next tool, the dodge and burn tool, allows you to dodge, which is lighten up the colors in an image, but also do burn, which allows you to darken the colors in the image, creating more vibrant color as necessary. And those are some of the more advanced tools you will use in GIMP. In our next tutorial of GIMP, we'll go over some of the color tools that you'll use on your images to change various parts of your image. Much like Photoshop, these are some of the main tools you will use to switch color balance, brightness and contrast, curves, and more. So to start off, we'll go to the Colors section, Color Balance. This is probably the main tool many people use to change the actual color in the image to something that they think is much more appropriate for the image in general. And as you can see, we can change these values to increase more of the color that we want to add to the image or subtract the color. And we can change the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights of the image. The next tool is Hue Saturation, which allows us to change overall the hue colors that are added to our image. So we can make it a green or a pink or what have you. We can change the lightness of the image, how much extra light is in the image, or if there's more shadows. And we can add more saturation of color to the image or make it more toward grayscale. With the Colorize option, we can do this in a more direct way, where it adds the color directly over all of the image. And of course, you can do this with the saturation and the lightness as well. With the brightness contrast, we can change the brightness to be less on the image, the contrast to be more, and vice versa. With the threshold, we can change what the image sees in terms of darkness or light. And for this, I would recommend using a layer mask so you can have something to blend over the image itself instead of leaving this as its own layer. With levels, we can go in and change the gamma on the image, so we can reduce the gamma, make it darker, or add more gamma to make it lighter. With the curves, this is much like Photoshop, where you have a histogram, and you can set the points on the curves to drag down the shadows, increase the highlights, and change the way the image looks on a very granular basis. If you go to Posterize, it creates an image that reduces its colors into various channels of colors. You don't see many colors if you go lower on the Posterize level. That looks like it was created in older graphics editors. If you go to Desaturate, we've been using this in a lot of our previous tutorials where we can desaturate by removing the colors from the image, and we can choose based on the luminosity, the average, or the lightness in the image. And that is just a quick overview of all the different color tools you could use in GIMP. Welcome to our next tutorial in GIMP. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to use the Paths tool inside of GIMP. So go over and click your Paths tool here. And on the left in the tool options, you will see that you have the design mode, the edit mode, and the move mode. The design mode allows you to create points on your image that will create a path. To connect the paths together so that way you create a completed path, go to Edit once you are finished clicking on the last point for your path, and then click on the starting point of your path. That will complete your path. From there, you can move the path if you need to, and you can start doing a selection from the path or stroke the path if you need to. As a solid color pattern, you can set the pixels of the line, and so on. Another mode you can do with paths is you can create a new path where you can create a curvature to your path. And this allows people to create some very interesting and unique paths. To create this path, you must make sure that you have the polygonal option turned off. And that's a very basic way to use paths in GIMP. Welcome to our next tutorial in GIMP. Now, in our previous tutorials of GIMP, you may have asked yourself, how do I install those scripts, plugins, and brushes that I see on the internet for GIMP? For example, we actually had a filter earlier that we used called the Advanced Tone Mapping, and we actually had to install that into our GIMP plugins folder, and the wavelet denoise we also had to install. So how do you do that? Well, once you find the plugin of your choice, for example, when we had to get wavelet denoise, you can go into your folders for GIMP, usually under Program Files, GIMP2, and then you'll see the different folders you have for GIMP. If you go into the lib folder, then go into GIMP, then go to 2.0 or whatever the version is, you will find the plugins folder. And this is the folder you will want to bring any plugins that are exe files that GIMP uses as extra plugins for its program. As you can see here, the wavelet denoise program is where we put that plugin. For other different things you want to put in your GIMP program, you go to the Share folder, the GIMP folder inside there, the version folder inside there, and then you can see that there are brushes folders, scripts folders, and various other folders you can bring extra things into GIMP to use for your projects. So if you have a script, for example, the Advanced Tone Mapping script, this is where it goes inside your GIMP program. And once you put those files into the correct folders you need to put them in, all you have to do is restart your GIMP, and you are ready to use your scripts, plugins, and brushes.